two people fighting for a seat on Portland City Council see the homeless crisis very differently.
They roll the dice and try something new.
Either what we're doing isn't working, or what we did was the best thing to do.
And that was the biggest move that we have made.
Tonight, Loretta Smith and Dan Ryan's take on the crisis we've sort of stopped talking about, but hasn't gone anywhere. And a woman in Eastern Oregon stepped up and spoke out when she says she was asked to falsify temperature readings at her construction job. Then, the company gave her a nice fat raise. Just kidding. She says they fired her. Yeah, that sounds more like it. Here's the story.
Hey, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. Happy Tax Day. Happy Mask Wednesday. Hopefully you're not planning any house parties of 9 or more people. You can always stay in, watch us, grab your phone, keep it in your hand, use that hashtag HeyDan, and chat with us during the show. With that, let's get started. And we are going to begin with our big story tonight, kind of a local version of a much larger conversation playing out right now across America. As the U.S. reckons with its racist past and tries to make changes for the better, kind of a secondary movement has taken roots to reframe America's history and reconsider who we put on pedestals, sometimes quite literally. Across the country, statues of Confederate generals have been torn down alongside U.S. presidents who also owned slaves. NASCAR, of course, has banned the Confederate flag, and now Portland Public Schools is part of the conversation. Students and parents, especially those of color, have been urging PPS to rename some of our schools. And last night, Maggie Vespa reports they scored a big win.
Woodrow Wilson High School will soon have a new name, likely by the end of the calendar year. This historic move, which came out of last night's Portland Public School Board meeting, is a long time coming. The Southwest Portland School was built in 1954 and named for former U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. More than half a century later, critics say that honor ignores the full scope of Wilson's life and legacy. His administration segregated federal offices, and he wrote a book sympathetic to the Ku Klux Klan. Last night, PPS administrators said the time had come.
And I'm confident that we'll find more appropriate, respectful, and affirming names for the.
You'll notice Superintendent Guerrero said names, plural. That's because Wilson High is the tip of the iceberg as far as what students and parents want to see changed.
There are 8 of 9 main Portland public high schools named after white presidents. These are presidents who do not have the best history with Black, Indigenous, people of color.
Among the schools she's referencing, Madison High School. Currently under construction for renovations, it was named for former president and slave owner James Madison.
I won't truly feel comfortable being anywhere where white supremacist culture is allowed.
2 students spoke in support of that change last night.
Attending Madison High School has been a very positive experience for me, but knowing the history of my school name is disheartening because there's still that lingering history of racism and slavery in all parts of the country, and it feels like a constant reminder that my people are still not truly free.
The calls for new names have been building for years. That said, it's no coincidence progress is being made now. Amid historic protests over racism and police violence, statues of Confederate heroes and white historical figures have toppled across the U.S. Last month, protesters tore down a statue of Thomas Jefferson at Portland's Jefferson High. Now administrators say they're serious about changing course. They're retooling the name-changing process to include more student voices, adding it's hard to nail down when more schools might actually get new names. They hope to see big progress during this coming school year. Meanwhile, they're proud of the kids who are speaking out. And to critics who worry about erasing history, they say this.
We're trying to tell a counter narrative in a more fuller picture of history. And we want to make sure that we're disrupting a sort of a cultural norm that the history that some of these names represent is the only history. And in fact, it's very problematic. It's proven to be racist, and it supports the history of colonization. And that's not part of our values at PPS.
Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
So now the question is, what should these schools be renamed? Here's an idea we think is worth your time. It's an Oregonian op-ed. Lewis and Clark law professor Tun Yin says the school should be named after this man, Minoru Yasui. He was a Japanese American from Oregon who challenged the curfew and exclusion orders against people of Japanese descent during World War II. He was prosecuted in federal court in Portland, where he argued the orders were unconstitutional. He ended up going to jail before being sent to an internment camp. I had a chance to talk to Tun Yin about this op-ed. I also asked him about the resistance to these types of changes.
There is a large group of people in society that doesn't believe we should be changing the names of schools or replacing monuments with the monuments or statues for other people. What do you say to those people in terms of teaching them about this person who you feel more people should probably know about?
Yeah, I think I can see the argument about these are historical statues or historical names and so forth. I think one thing to be clear is that when there's a renaming effort, it's not rewriting history. The history will still remain. Obviously, President Wilson will not be erased from the history books as having been the president. I think it's a question of who do we want to commemorate with statues and names of buildings and so forth. And so, again, I happen to bring up Minoru Yasui simply because, one, I think he's not that well known, even though he actually did have a case go before the Supreme Court. The other cases that make up the Japanese-American internment cases tend to be more well known, one involving Fred Korematsu and the other involving Gordon Hiraibashi. But Yasui's case was one of the big four that the Supreme Court decided. He also received the civilian presidential medal from President Obama. It's the highest civilian award that the federal government gives. So clearly the President Obama recognized Yasui's stature in terms of civil rights history. And so given that he was an Oregonian, that he was born here, he grew up here, he attended the Oregon colleges, it seems to me that we really should be honoring one of our own.
During the last census, Asian Americans accounted for nearly 5% of our population, third only behind Hispanic and Latinos and Caucasians. We'll put the rest of my conversation with Professor Tun Yin on the KGW YouTube channel if you'd like to hear the whole thing. Check it out. All right, new topic, the way COVID-19 has changed the way that we work. Of course, a lot of people are still working from home, but for some, that's not an option. And it is nice when your job has some protections in place. I think so. Like, for instance, here at KGW, everybody wears a mask as they move through the building. We take it off only when we're at the desk or we're here in the studio. But Kyla Boshi talked to a woman in Eastern Oregon who claims when she tried to keep her coworkers safe, she was rewarded by being fired.
It's a job that's more critical now than ever, safety compliance, and a job Katrina Bryant took seriously. She was required to check the temperature of all workers in their cars before they could enter a construction site in Boardman where Amazon is building a new warehouse.
It was extremely apparent we were getting faulty readings.
Katrina said the thermometers seen in these photos just didn't work.
We were getting readings that were extraordinarily low, like in the 70s. We're getting readings that are incredibly high, like 107.
And if they did, and an employee tested above 100 degrees, Katrina said she was directed to manipulate the readings so potentially sick workers would be allowed onto the construction site.
We were told to let them know to roll down the windows, to turn on the air conditioners, to use soda bottles, water bottles, things like that on their forehead.
Katrina said she alerted her bosses at Gray Construction on May 13th. 3 days later, she was let go. Katrina is now suing Gray Construction, claiming whistleblower retaliation. Her lawyer, Michael Fuller, claims she was fired for simply reporting information she believed to be evidence of a violation of a state or federal law, rule, or regulation. In response, Gray Construction said, "We strongly believe Ms. Bryant's claims have no merit," adding, "The company has taken appropriate precautions during the pandemic to help protect everyone on our job sites." Amazon, which is not named in the suit, did not respond for comment. Boardman is in rural Umatilla County, which has become a major hotspot for the spread of coronavirus with more than 1,100 confirmed cases. It's not clear if any of those COVID cases are connected to the construction site. Kyla Boshi, KGW News.
In honor of the new Concourse E opening up at PDX, I wanted to read this question we got from Carol on Facebook. What is being done at PDX when people arrive here from states like Florida, Texas, etc.? Is there a quarantine procedure? Now, if you've been watching our friends on Nightly News right before we come onto the air, you know the situation in those two states is pretty bad right now. Just today, Florida and Texas reported more than 10,000 new cases each, which makes Oregon's numbers seem kind of low in comparison. So are we monitoring travelers from out of state? Well, we asked the Port of Portland, and they say actually no. We are not. They say, quote, we follow federal and state public health guidelines around inbound travelers. And at this time, the state of Oregon does not have any quarantine or screening requirements for travelers at this time. We'll tell you if that changes.
Politics is nothing compared to growing up with 6 brothers.
If I was intimidated, I wouldn't have survived childhood.
Now Dan Ryan and Loretta Smith are facing off to fill an empty seat on Portland City Council. And I know everything is COVID-19 and protests right now, but homelessness hasn't gone anywhere.
We have some assets in this community.
So I asked them both what they'd do about it when the story continues.
All right, let's answer another Hey Dan question. This person wants to know, how will the rules impact weddings? Okay, it's time to get out the red pen and start cutting down the guest list because weddings have to get even smaller. Indoor weddings will have to have 10 people or less. Outdoor weddings, you must be able to maintain that 6 feet of distance from other guests that you don't live with or wear a mask. One important note though, counties in phase 2 can still have the larger weddings of up to 250 people if they can still do all of the social distancing and follow all of the guidelines already in place. Do you have questions? Let us know. Use the hashtag HeyDan.
Welcome back to the story. Thank you for everyone using the hashtag HeyDan. We know that not everybody is able to watch on TV every day. Heck, some of you don't even have a TV. So if you want to watch our shows, you can always see them on YouTube. So if you missed something and just want to catch up maybe on some past episodes, they're all right there at KGW's YouTube channel. One thing we do have on there is my entire conversation with City Council candidates Loretta Smith and Dan Ryan. We played part of my conversation with both of them yesterday, where we talked about their thoughts about calls to defund the police. And after we showed that, we got an email from a viewer named Cliff who wanted to know, hey Dan, how many votes did Loretta Smith and Dan Ryan get in the primary in May? Because remember, there used to be 18 candidates vying for that city council position, and in May we narrowed it down to those 2. Loretta Smith took 19% of the vote, or about 38,420 votes. Dan Ryan took 17%, which was 33,924 votes. Tara Hurst took 3rd place with a little more than 30,000 votes, so it was close, or about 15% of the vote, but only the top 2 candidates will compete in this write-off. So it's going to be between Smith and Ryan. So now on August 11th, Portland will vote between Loretta Smith and Dan Ryan. And I mentioned my conversation with them yesterday. We asked about the chaos downtown and the push to defund police. Smith said that she supports moving resources from PPB to other areas. And Ryan had a similar take, saying that those funds need to be repurposed into community safety. So today, I want to play a part of my conversation with both of them about homelessness, because it might not be the crisis that everyone is talking about right now, but it sure hasn't gone anywhere. And I wanted to ask Ryan specifically about how he feels being a first-time candidate in this moment. He says it's an issue he takes personally, both because of his family history and his health history.
Is there a certain level of intimidation there, running for a seat during all of this?
You know, first of all, I'm the youngest of 8. I have 6 older brothers. So if I was intimidated, I wouldn't have survived childhood. You know, I've always been able to take a punch and get back up. And so I'm comfortable with the intensity of this moment. And I also think that because of all this chaos, because of all this crises that we're dealing with, again, there's going to be a willingness to actually roll the dice and try something new. And that makes me excited. I do believe it's the right time and the right place for someone with my career background and also my life story. You know, I came home to die in 1995 because I was told I had 6 months to live. And so I got home, and then science caught up with me, and the HIV drugs improved. And next thing you know, the same doctor that told me to make plans for my demise was saying, oh, you're going to have to go suit up and go work again. So I've been living on some wonderful borrowed time for 25 years. I feel great. So yes, I am an optimist, and I've always taken on challenges. It is personal for me because my 3rd oldest brother, Tim, died on our streets 6 years ago. And he had mental health issues, stopped taking his meds, started over abusing with recreational substance abuse drugs, and that happened. But what was frustrating is there really wasn't a system set up for someone like him. And it wasn't like a house for him was going to be helpful. We tried to house him, but getting the fix every day of drugs was what mattered. So we really have to look at this houselessness crisis with more dimensions. There's that population, there's the essential workers, which I think people are finally starting to give some respect towards, as they're allowing us to have the privilege to survive during this pandemic, why they risk their lives for us. They can't even afford to live in Portland. What's the long-term affordable housing for that population? Then there's the population that's just on the brink of being homeless because they're just making enough to maybe cover rent, but one layoff, one furlough away from being on the streets. What's that population's strategy?
Ryan also said there needs to be more transparency, especially with how the city spends money from bonds that Portland voters love to pass. Funny enough, when I asked Loretta Smith about homelessness, she actually pointed to one of those bonds as one of the city's big success stories.
Well, I think we're in the right direction by approving the ballot measure in the May election to get support services to the most needy and the most vulnerable in our communities. I think that was the biggest move that we have made in a few years to be able to address the chronic homelessness. I think that we should figure out ways to use some of those one-time only monies to actually get the folks who are unsheltered on the streets. I know now that we have a lot of apartment buildings that are empty as a result. I'm not sure how many of the hotels are up to full speed. We have some assets in this community, and we need to figure out how to marry those assets with the most vulnerable on our city streets. And I am looking forward to seeing what we can do in the future, in this coming year, with the new resources that we have to offer supportive services to those people who are houseless, and to offer them mental health and drug and alcohol counseling, which seems to be part of the driver to folks who are living on our streets.
Once again, the special election between Loretta Smith and Dan Ryan for Portland Commission Position 2 is August 11th. That's less than a month away. Ballots should be mailed out in 1 week. Growing up in West Lynn while white is different of an experience than growing up there while black. And it's a difference a local filmmaker has set out to capture in a documentary from 2015. Devin Haskins learned her experiences then are still relevant now.
Oregon's population is almost 87% white and only 2.2% black.
Often you will be the only one at work. You'll be the only one at the store. You'll be, the only one in your class.
Melissa Lowry and her family live in a suburb of Portland. The mother of two girls wanted to show her daughters, even being outnumbered, they weren't alone.
I know black girls in suburbia. I'm one of them. I graduated with one other one.
When Lowry's oldest daughter came home upset from school after being questioned by another classmate why her hair was different from the others, Lowry knew the story needed to be shared.
I grew up in West Lynn, Oregon, a middle to upper class community. I had the typical suburban kid experience, but happened to be black.
This is her 2015 film, Black Girl in Suburbia. It's about her story of growing up in West Lynn and what it was like from her perspective, and that of other girls walking in her same shoes even years later.
I needed my kids to know that they weren't by themselves.
The women in the film detail their own experiences about growing up black in a predominantly white community, from stereotypes such as what some people think they eat or drink, or what their hair feels like, to even getting singled out when talking about issues of race in a classroom.
I was the only black girl, and she was like, "Do you care if I mind it? Do you mind if I say it?" And I was just like, "Well, no, but you shouldn't have to ask me that."
You don't have to go ask a random black person questions about black things, black people, black culture. You can Google it and do your own research.
Lowry has shown the film to schools around the country, opening the eyes of other students and teachers. And even 5 years later, what these women detailed on camera ring true for others today. Racism, or a bias towards others, whether you want to believe it exists or not, is still alive.
If you are a person that who sees the world as it's not that bad, I would ask and really encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and to find folks that are really who are on the other end of the not so bad.
If you want to watch the film, just head to blackgirlinsuburbia.com for more information. I'm Devin Haskins, KGW News.
All right, stick around. We're going to read some comments after the break. Use that hashtag #HeyDan, and we will finish the story after this.
We've been getting a lot of Hey Dan questions about this. Where outdoors do I have to wear a mask? Does this apply when you're walking on the sidewalk? What about at a park or out shopping in neighborhoods? So the governor's office told me anytime a person is outdoors and cannot maintain 6 feet of distance with people outside their household, they need to wear a mask. So that would apply to a sidewalk, a park, or out walking around. Do you have a question? We will do our best to get you answers. Use everyone's favorite hashtag, HeyDan.
A couple comments here. Aaron wrote in and said, I just received a jury summons for later this month. What precautions are being taken at the courthouse for jurors? We did that story a while ago, and I wonder if some of the precautions have changed. So that's a good one. I'm going to look into this one for you, Aaron, and keep watching. We'll see what kind of answers we can find for you. And then AJ said, hey, Dan, have you guys talked to Sarah for PDX? This is a tweet coming in. That is Sarah Iannarone, who is one of the candidates for mayor, about the issues in this election. You guys seem to be overlooking the mayoral election over the council election. So I'm glad you wrote this in, because I talked to Sarah Iannarone today for about 45 minutes. So we're going to have all of that for you next week. I have a scheduled interview with Mayor Ted Wheeler on Friday. So we're going to talk to them about all the issues, and we're going to kind of lay that out for you next week. That said, mayor is important, but these council seats are important too. The way that our government is set up here in Portland, the council seats have a lot of power. So does the mayor, but everybody is important here. We're going to try and keep you guys informed as we approach this election in August. Until then, that is the story for tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.